Since we got the Type 055 destroyer teaming up with the Liaoning aircraft carrier, we have been smashing through the so-called first island chain like a raging torrent. Hey, let me share some knowledge. What exactly is the first island chain? The so-called island chain has both geographical significance, it also has military significance. In the 1950s, U.S. Secretary of State Dulles proposed the island chain strategy. The main purpose was to contain China. For example, the first island chain. Look at that map. From the northern Japanese archipelago, then heading south to the Ryukyu Islands, then connecting to our Taiwan Island, and then to the Philippines, then connecting to the Greater Sunda Islands. Goodness, this chain of islands directly encircles China. This chain of islands, it is only about 160 kilometers from mainland China. The purpose of this island chain is to blockade China from the sea. If a major power can't even access the sea, then it can't engage in maritime trade. Without maritime trade, economic development is impossible. Some people say that isn't walking an option, not to mention the mountains are high and the roads are long. Some borders between countries have not even been clearly defined. How do you expect to get through? Are you going to play the role of the monk from Journey to the West, pretending to have a pass? So if a modern nation wants to become a great power, it must have maritime power. Why was it that after we founded the country, and all the way until the 1980s, the economy just could not take off? It had a lot to do with the first island chain. Back then, we had no maritime power. Later in the 1980s, after the Sino-American honeymoon period, you see, they let us pass through the seas. From then on, our economy was able to take off. So at that time, our second generation of planners could be said to be forward-thinking. They had already assessed that this window of opportunity, at most, would not last more than 20 years. So back then, we tightened our belts, but still needed to develop our Navy. This was to ensure the security of our overseas trade. The shipping routes at sea are the lifelines of great powers. Lines, whether it is the import of energy or the export of goods, it basically all has to go by sea. So by the 1990s, the Soviet Union could not hold on. It just imploded on the spot. At that time, people were very clear-headed. The honeymoon period was about to end. The fall of the common enemy was equivalent to the end of China-U.S. relations. Just watch. After everyone bowed their heads and divided up the Soviet Union's territory, the Americans immediately started targeting us. Then the so-called Yanhei incident happened. Do you see? Is that the reason? Then, in 1996, 97, 98, there was a large-scale collapse of state-owned enterprises and layoffs. Workers' lives became unsustainable. What was the reason? It was also largely related to the blockade of maritime routes. You see, when did our economy take a big leap forward? It was when we joined the WTO. At that time, we agreed to very strict conditions. Even if they were harsher, we had to accept them. This way, we could go overseas and do business with everyone. And look at how many years of economic development followed. It has been an explosive growth, soaring to new heights. It became the second largest economy in the world. The reason is right here. You said after we joined the WTO, the U.S. would not block us anymore and would not cause trouble for us. Hey, you know what? There really has been less trouble. Why is that? Because they were tied down by bin Laden for 10 years and then got stuck in the Afghanistan quagmire. He does not have time to think anymore. First island chain. That is all I will say about it. Let me give a brief introduction to the second island chain. As for the second island chain, it is fairly simple. It runs straight down from Japan's Guam, basically heading south to Iwo Jima and the Mariana Islands. Then a line cuts to Australia. The so-called second island chain, that encompasses all of Asia, specifically the boundaries of East Asian countries, including the entire ASEAN. So what is the third island chain? Actually, the third island chain has nothing to do with China. It is entirely drawn by the United States for itself. You could say it is the United States' strategic front line for security, centered around Hawaii. It stretches north to the Aleutian Islands and south to some islands in Oceania. You see, why did the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor back then? Well, it was actually an attack on America's last line of defense, is the third island chain. If the third island chain is breached, then the United States will be wide open, no longer secure from then on. So you see, throughout 2021, we relied on the 5 major regions and the Liaoning aircraft carrier. Together, we have torn open the first island chain. Do you think the U.S. can accept this? If you deal with the first island chain today, tomorrow, you might be able to take the second island chain. Once you take the second island chain, are you planning to go for the third island chain as well? At that point, it is uncertain who will be blockading whom. So this matter is extremely stimulating for the U.S. Someone said it, then why did not the U.S. stop us quickly? You mentioned this in the last episode. So why did they let our lead dance region run wild all the way until December? So you see, you have to understand the U.S. Think about what the U.S. was doing in 2021. He is still in Afghanistan. Most of his energy is tied up there in Afghanistan. You are not only there with the troops, but also with the equipment. And most importantly, the money is there. What do you mean? It is about war contractors and military bidding projects. The remaining payments from the defense industry complex have not been made yet. Can we just turn around like that? So in August 2021, you see the U.S. hastily announced the end of the war in Afghanistan. They rushed to withdraw from Afghanistan. They did not even care about the people. They did not even care about their lackeys. Did you see that? That lackey tried to escape by clinging to the plane's landing gear. Later, the two who fell from the landing gear. Do you think that traitor had a good ending? Mixing with the Americans. When the American soldiers pull out, there will be room for even the American dogs in that transport plane. But there won't be a spot for the traitor. Look how miserable it is. Clinging to the landing gear from over 10,000 meters up. Imagine how desperate that feeling is. If I had known, I would not have done it in the first place. Sigh, people like this are not few in China, and they even think they can think independently. By then, they might be worse off than dogs. That is why the U.S. abruptly pulled out of the Afghanistan battlefield. Why was that? Where else could it be? It was because we took out the first island chain. When the U.S. saw that, they thought, this won't do. No way. If we do not stop him now, he will be off to the skies. Then Afghanistan is lost, and the commission is gone too. We have to stop China. So you see, in August 2021, they announced the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Pack up the household items as the new year approaches. In January, take a look at the deployment of U.S. aircraft carriers. January 2022, the U.S. aircraft carrier fleet, except for those undergoing maintenance in Hong Kong, there is one, the USS Truman, stationed to guard the center. It needs to dock in the Mediterranean, guarding Europe, preventing the little brother from rebelling. The remaining 5 ships are all in Asia. Moreover, they are all between the first and second island chains. You see, at that time there was the Reagan in Yokosuka, and the Lincoln off the coast of Japan. The USS Essex is near the Ryukyu Islands. The USS Carl Vinson, the Bungo Channel, and the USS America. 5 aircraft carriers are gathered in Asia. What does this indicate? This indicates that the United States has shifted its strategic focus from the battlefield in Afghanistan to the Asia-Pacific region. At that time, there was talk about the strategy of rebalancing to the Asia-Pacific. That is exactly the issue. Do you know why? It is because of what we did in 2021. We scared the Americans. Usually, according to American rules, if 1 aircraft carrier comes over, that is a warning. If 2 aircraft carriers come over, that is a threat. 3 aircraft carriers are coming, then we start evacuating. If 4 carriers arrive, it is very likely war will break out. If 5 carriers arrive, then do not ask. It is definitely happening. It was about to happen. And I remember it was January 20th, 2022. France's energy giant Total and America's energy giant Chevron withdrew from Myanmar. There are 2 reasons. One is Aung San Suu Kyi being overthrown by the Myanmar military. And secondly, the U.S. wanted to use this as an excuse to take control of Myanmar. If at that time the U.S. had taken control of Myanmar, then China would have lost. Why is that? This is what we call great power geopolitical warfare. Look, just like back then, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, involving the United States, if at that time the Soviet Union had truly been able to build missile bases in Cuba and freely deployed nuclear missiles, then America has lost. This is just like the rules in the underworld. Then the little brother saw it. Damn, boss. You can't even protect yourself. Your home is being held at gunpoint. How can you still be the boss? Then let us forget it. Isn't it just like back then, if the Americans really took over Myanmar, how would the entire ASEAN view it? This is China. Can't even guard its own backyard. It definitely can't beat the U.S. So when we choose sides, let us stand with the U.S. and keep a distance from China. When the Americans come after him, don't get blood on us. So you have to think about the series of events that happened in Myanmar last year in the second half. They are actually a continuation of what I want to talk about. Therefore, nothing in the world happens in isolation. Look at the self-media online, constantly commenting on Myanmar. Is it really to crack down on telecom fraud? Everything is just a pawn in the game of great powers. Alright, No more talk about Myanmar today. Let us continue. In 2022, how we used the thousand-hand Guanyin system to compete with the Americans. Dealing with the Americans, Art. The Americans gather 5 aircraft carrier groups, ability to team up with, to present a deadly stance against us. They present a deadly stance against us. They present a deadly stance against us. A decisive blow. They present a deadly stance against us. They present a deadly stance against us. A unique setup. One pilot focuses on flying and weaponry. Well, could it be that the rapid advancement is due to our repeated shifts along the island chain? Actually, that is not entirely the case. The real reason is that the United States has already sensed that China's thousand-hands Guanyin system has been growing exponentially, especially in the second half of 2021. It reached a terrifying scale. Not only capable of collecting data, and it can simultaneously command thousands of unmanned submarines lurking deep in the South China Sea and the ocean to carry out tasks that humans cannot accomplish. I wonder if anyone still remembers on October 2nd, 2021, the U.S. Seawolf-class nuclear submarine Connecticut was moving through the South China Sea when it collided with an unidentified object, causing injuries to 11 sailors on board. It was eventually towed back to Guam. Fans with good memories, do you still remember this incident? It happened right during our National Day. That American nuclear submarine, the Connecticut, as usual, came to our South China Sea, executing a stealth mission. What are the specific objectives? I can't find that information, but most likely, it is to coordinate with the electronic reconnaissance aircraft in the sky, to collect hydrographic and seabed data from the South China Sea, to enrich C4's database, and lay the groundwork for a strategic return to the Asia-Pacific. It was already October back then. Of course, we all knew about the U.S. strategy to re-engage in the Asia-Pacific. You know, if the U.S. nuclear submarines had come to patrol in the South China Sea before, we would not mind. We are not that petty. You want to patrol? Go ahead. Just do your patrol. Now that you have finalized the plan, it is all out in the open. They are preparing to go after us. Then it would not be appropriate for you to come again. But since you are here, we should at least entertain you. Otherwise, it would not make sense. So the thousand-hand Guanyin system, it is activated, thousands of sensors hidden deep in the ocean. Don't be fooled. That Virginia-class submarine claims an underwater noise level of 90 decibels. That is quite quiet. It can blend in with ocean noise. It is almost indistinguishable, but we have more than just sonar in the South China Sea. That day, there were not only unmanned anti-submarine aircraft in the sky, so the Dnieper was quietly approaching us. It was like holding an invisible straw in hand, saying, "You can't see me." But in fact, we were very clear about its presence, so it ended up getting hit. How tragic. 11 people were injured on the spot. Among them, 5 were unconscious. You can still find that photo online. Look at how terrible it is. The front of the nuclear submarine is missing half. It was completely smashed. So why do they say it was a collision? It definitely was not caused by a torpedo explosion. If it was caused by a torpedo explosion, then the submarine would have self-destructed underwater. Imagine that it is a nuclear submarine self-destructing in the South China Sea. Do you think we will still eat seafood after that? That is our territorial waters. So after this submarine was hit, it immediately surfaced, quickly transforming into a kayak, drifting at sea for a whole week. Finally swam from the South China Sea to Guam. Only then did survival come from near death. After arriving in Guam, the U.S. side immediately issued orders. No crew members were allowed to disembark. The wounded were evacuated by helicopter. The soldiers from the submarine were taken away in groups, directly returned to the United States. The damaged submarine was covered with a large canvas, tightly and securely. Then it was towed back to the port of San Diego, USA. At that time, I remember I was very confused. Why was it like this? There must be something going on. They are definitely covering something up. This has been over 2 years. On their own website in the U.S., more and more information has gradually been revealed. As for the following content, I can't guarantee it is completely true, because, after all, this source comes from a non-governmental declassification website in the U.S., based within the United States. The whole world does not recognize him. Alright, that is enough for now. You should know what website I am referring to. It was said that at that time, the USS Connecticut was operating in our South China Sea. Suddenly, all sonar systems failed. There were clear signs of human interference. At that time, Captain Cameron Argliani of the Connecticut ordered to surface and approach the shallow mere. maintain data synchronization of depth with satellites. However, during the surfacing process, we began to sense strong electromagnetic interference, to the point that Connecticut's AN Bar B, SY Bar 2 underwater operation combat systems are unable to function properly. Fortunately, the pressure gauge indicated that the submarine was still surfacing. About 2 minutes later, the BQS Bar 24 high-frequency active sonar detected a massive object approaching rapidly. The Connecticut was approaching quickly from the front left. At that moment, Commander Cameron quickly assessed that it was likely already under attack. Lock-on command launched torpedo bait WLY-1. But after a few seconds, the collision still occurred. At that moment, the powerful impact caused the entire hull to rotate to the right. The 11 injured sailors were injured during this hull rotation. According to later reports, the Connecticut did not receive any warnings or orders to leave throughout the entire process. In the end, the report arbitrarily attributed the collision to a high-speed Chinese unmanned submarine. Look at how the Americans are shifting the blame. It is obvious their own navigation skills are lacking. It must have been drunk driving. They hit a reef for sure. They crashed into a coral reef. They always blame everything on us. I really hate it. On October 8th, 2021, our first day at work, Mr. Zhao from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs held a routine press conference. He urged the U.S. to promptly investigate whether a nuclear leak occurred and whether it damaged the local marine environment. Among other issues, he expressed strong concern. What does that mean? It means, what exactly did you come here for? You banged your head against the mountain. And who is responsible if you mess up my doorstep? You can't just brush it off and leave. Later, the U.S. military's assessment showed that the force of the impact was just right. And the point of impact was also very precise. Not only did it not cause a nuclear leak, but it also allowed the submarine to retain some power. In return, at low speed, this assessment information caused a huge stir at the Pentagon. While this Panda is in the South China Sea, Yanggu, it took so many years to raise such a monster. This is no longer just a data link neural network system. This is really fucking deadly. Hurry up and fix the injury chain. Stop messing around in Afghanistan. Get everything sorted and head to Asia quickly. Let that 1,000-armed Guanyin nurture for a few more years. Otherwise, it will turn into a 1,000-armed Buddha. Look at this whole series of events. That led to 2022. We are in the first island chain, engaged in a deadly battle with the USC-4 nerve network system. We fought to the death. How we managed to overpower their 5 aircraft carrier groups will be told next time.